All right, yes, welcome to yet another lesson in psychology for IGSE. So, in today's lesson, we just want to look at the biology of behavior, how the brain works, the nervous system, the hormones, and the genetic influence on behavior. So, firstly, we are looking at the structure of the nervous system, structure of the brain, how it affects different parts and everything. So this way we are starting. So just keep on watching and listening as we are looking deep into this biology of behavior. All right. So the psychological concept is that the brain, this is where thinking, sometimes the feelings, the behavior, it comes from the brains and the nervous system, as well as the hormones. So all these things they are connected. When you're talking about the biology of behavior, everything is connected, as you can see from this image, from the brain, all these things, the heart, the hormones, as well as the behavior of the person, it will be affected by all these elements. Let's talk about the central nervous system, or sometimes what is called the CNS, the central nervous system. So this is the part of a body or of the head which is connected to the brain as well as the spinal cord. So the spinal cord, as you can see, it will be connected to the neck and the other parts of the body, and this is the brain, or what you might call the cerebrum, the midbrain, the pons, the medulla. This is all the brain stem, how we think and where information is processed from here. So from the brain and spinal cord, this is where information is processed and coordinated. So, in the central nervous system, this is where information is processed and this is where behavior is coordinated. Okay, so it's a very, very important part of the body. This is where we also see that there is a skull or brain, as well as the spinal cord in central nervous system. So it's a very important part of of the body. This is also where we see thoughts are coordinated, how we think, the emotions, when we feel for others, the memory, how we remember, voluntary movements. You decide like I want to move, and then the spinal cord. It acts as a pathway for signals between brain and body. Kuti, whatever information that is processed in the brain, it moves through the spinal cord. So if in your brain you think like I need to walk, okay, so you need to process that information first in your brain. So once it's processed, it gets down through the spinal cord and is distributed. That's when you start to see muscle movement, walking, clapping, cooking. So everything is a system. When it comes to a body, is a system on its own that is moving around. Okay, so there is also the peripheral nervous system, PNS. So what does it do? As you see from this picture, it connects the central nervous system to the rest of the body. Okay, it connects. It also works as a nervous system. So we have somatic. So somatic, this is where movement is controlled. It sends message from the central nervous system, like my muscles, just like you're saying, when you're moving your arm to pick up a book, it starts from the brain, and the messages are sent that you need to have this voluntary movement, and then you do it. Okay, and then for the autonomic nervous system, it controls involuntary actions or automatic processes. Okay, I think I tried to talk to you about this before. So this is where you do not necessarily prepare that I want to cook, I want to pick up a book, but your body naturally prepares for action. So there was no processing in the mind like what you do when you want to pick up a book, but rather it's a situation that the brain will quickly send messages now, or what you might call a fight or flight. If you're holding a hot pot, your brain will send signals like leave that pot. Okay, so you flee away from the situation. If an animal is coming that is dangerous, your brain will quickly send messages like you need to fight it, or you need to flee the situation again. So you notice that if you are afraid, when you are afraid, usually your heartbeat, it becomes faster. So your heart rate becomes faster. Your breathing, it might change. The blood flow maybe you might not know, but the blood flow to the muscles, maybe you become tense. So this is controlled by what we call the autonomic nervous system. It's part of the peripheral nervous system. So that is what happens. Everything is organized in that way. And then we have the parasympathetic. It conserves energy to rest and digest. When we rest and digest, when you're sleeping, it all that information comes from the brain. You need to, like, you can tell that I am tired, I need to rest. Okay, so all these are affected by what we call the parasympathetic. So it slows your heart rate, it stimulates your digestion. Everything that has to do with rest is controlled by this. Okay, so the peripheral, it connects the central nervous system to the organs, limbs, and skin. As you can see, it carries sensory and motor information to and from the nervous system. It regulates involuntary body functions like heartbeat and breathing. So you see that even if you are scared, maybe you're in the forest or a new place that you don't, even if you are scared, your heartbeat might be fast, but you won't die right away. Why don't you die? Because the peripheral nervous system controls that. If it loses value, then you might faint or you might just die there. So this is what happens. So this is the division of the nervous system. We have peripheral and we have central. As you can see from this, peripheral, this is where we find autonomic. And autonomic, just like you said, autonomic is where we get involuntary actions, where we fight or flee from the situation. Okay, and then that is for peripheral. And then central, we have somatic. That is the one that you said you are controlling your movements. Okay, so the difference here is that in peripheral, the movements that you do, they are involuntary. It just happens naturally. You feel like I'm holding a hot pot, I need to let it go, what we call the fight or flight situation. But in somatic, the central nervous system, this is where you decide, because central system, remember, information is processed clearly. So this is where you decide, I want to cook, I want to clean. This is the same. Fine. And then under autonomic, we have sympathetic and parasympathetic. Okay, so sympathetic, this is whereby again we fight and flight, and parasympathetic, this is when your brain tells your body that you need to rest and digest. And then for somatic, this is where you make use of your senses, make use of your motors, your body, muscles are told you need to stretch your hand, and your senses, they tell you you need to feel this way. So this is the division of the nervous system or the brain. Then we also have very important elements, that is the neurons. So the neurons, these are like the small cells that transmit messages, like masai. That's why you see how the computer, it was made from from this uh, function, that you need some transmitters to get you kudhara kwave nema aerials atitika kuti ukwanisa kuwa na transmitters. So that's the same. So these are my neurons, these are the small transmitters that will receive and send signals to your brain. As you can see from this picture, it's a brain. So these neurons are like all that we've been saying here. It's transmitted by neurons. So neurons are very, very important. Okay. So we have the dendrites, that is to receive signals from other neurons. We have the soma, process information. All these are just neurons, but all these neurons, they are there to transmit messages to and fro so that your brain works properly. Okay, so if you are not mentally stable, it means probably one of your neurons is not working properly, where it's supposed to send information like you need to go bath, you need to pick this up, you need to do this. it's affected. So that's why you see someone is mentally unstable, this is what will be happening. Okay, and then here we have what we call the reflex actions. These are the reactions that we do when something happens to us, how we respond to what we call stimuli. It protects you from harm. For example, if you touch a hot surface, you immediately remove your hand. As you can see from this picture, stimulation, this thing is hot, and this person will remove. So what happened here before this person could remove or could withdraw the hand? This was stimulus was that fire that is hot. So the sensory neurons that are very sensitive to heat, they will quickly send messages to the spinal cord. Remember the spinal cord? After sending messages to the spinal cord will quickly send messages to the motor neurons. Because the motor neurons, these are the ones that control your muscles. Just like the word motor, it moves, right? So the motor neurons, they'll quickly send messages and you remove your hand from the hot surface. So this is how the brain works. You are exposed to stimulus, something that brings harm to you. Your senses, they quickly send messages to your spinal cord. Your spinal cord will send to the motor neurons. Motor neurons, they will respond, and then you remove your hand. So what you should know is that nervous system allows the body to perceive, respond, and adapt. That is the nervous system, the brain. The central nervous system, it integrates information, gaya information ya PYI. And then the peripheral nervous system, it carries messages to and from. So the messages irikubva ku CNS, inoendeswa ku PNS, then irikubva ku body ichiunzwa futi uku. Somatic anditi, this is where watinoona somatic anditi voluntary voluntary actions, and also ANS, my involuntary actions. And sympathetic, it prepares you for action, and parasympathetic conserves your energy. So ndo zvatikutaura isusu kuti from, we just start again and see biology of behavior. Behavior yauchazoitwa nemunhu, whether you're moving your hand, whether you shout, whether you do, it's controlled by the brain. And the most important thing per brain is what we call the nervous system. And tumagesi uto tukudai, these are neurons transmitting messages to different parts of your body. Okay, to think, to feel, to behave, just really connected. So this, the brain, it sends messages to the spinal cord. Spinal cord, you end such to other part of the body. Okay, so peripheral is here. The nervous system is divided into two: peripheral, central. Central, it processes information. Peripheral, it takes messages from the body to the central nervous system, and from the central nervous system to the body. Okay. The neurons, these are transmitters. They will transmit messages, in your brain. And then my reflex actions, these are the quick and automatic responses. But the moment you're exposed to stimulus, if your brain is working properly, information ichafambiswa musoro until wasvika pakuti I need to withdraw my hand. Okay, so this is what I had for biology of behavior. So I hope you understand. If you have any questions, you can ask.